Welcome to the Black Roots of British History, the podcast where we explore the rich and diverse history of Black people through the ages. If you like me and have a passion for history, grab a shovel and join us as we dig deep into the foundations of Black British history. There's a saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, which basically means it is easier to show something than to describe it in words. I say that because if you look at a lot of medieval art, amongst a sea of European faces, which is what we tend to associate medieval Britain with, there are a lot of depictions of Black people, and not just as servants or slaves, but as knights or even as saints. So let me give you some context. The medieval age, otherwise known as the Middle Ages, was an era in time that spanned from 400 AD to late 1400s AD. It is also known as the Dark Ages, but this was a terminology that was coined by Renaissance scholar Francesca Petrarch. And the reason why it was referred to as the Dark Ages was based upon the lack of cultural and scientific advancements. There was the fall of the Roman Empire, which brought in the Middle Ages. And there was, of course, the Black Death, which decimated about a third of the European population. However, there were also other notable events. Number one being the establishment of the Holy Roman Empire by Charlemagne I, which also brought in the Carolingian dynasty, as well as a bastard duke from Normandy becoming the King of England. So whether you're talking about Normans, Vikings, Saxons, or Franks, the Middle Ages should have probably been called the White Ages, as we tend to assume that England was a ethnically white. Than the whole of Europe, we think that. But in cities such as London and Bristol, there was a diverse population that included people who would be described as blackamoors, who were Black Muslims from Morocco, Moors, and Black Ethiopians. Black Ethiopians, by the way, isn't about people from the terminology was used to just basically describe Black Africans. And sometimes, as a singularity, these groups of people were all called just Black. Because at this time, Black British wasn't a terminology that was coined. In fact, that terminology was coined like 1950s. According to a middle-aged writer called Richard Devizes, he described London as full of Moors, magicians, and men of all nations. Now, I'm sure it wasn't giving us only Game the Village sort of vibes. There wasn't just one or two. However, unfortunately, there isn't an exact account for how many Black people were in England at that time. But in today's episode, I'm choosing to focus on 4 notable figures in the Middle Ages: a prisoner, a knight, a saint, and a man with no name. So the first depiction of a Black person was in a small image in something called the Domesday Book. The Domesday Book was basically a book that had all information about landowners, what they owned, how much it was worth, including, livestock, land, people who tend to be slaves. And under the section that was about Derbyshire in particular, there is a Black man who is hanging using his hands off the letter I, and he's wearing some sort of tunic. Now, according to some, it would be the earliest indication of Black presence in England. There is also some debate as to what this person's occupation may have been based upon what he was wearing. Now, some say that due to the tunic he was wearing, that he was a peasant or maybe, some servant. However, some people, such as Dr. Onyenka Nubia, describe him as a tradesman, and I actually would like to agree with the latter. Now, our next person, we all could agree that he will probably be described nowadays as a runaway slave. And normally slaves weren't seen as people, probably just be, recognized or counted as inventory, just like animals, just like stock that you have. So it was only due to a writ by King Henry III that we know him as Bartholomew of Ethiopia. Now, again, as I said earlier, this is not saying that he's from Ethiopia. The terminology Ethiopia was used just to describe someone from Africa. But we do know that Bartholomew was escaped from Lord de Linton, who brought him over from England. And what's happened is that basically the guy ran away and people want to look out for him, say he's gone, and we don't know where he is. And I think because this guy was a lord, they made such a fuss about it. Luckily, there is no record of him being arrested, so we're on the side of hopefulness that he had found a safe place, possibly in diverse towns such as Coventry or London or York or Bristol, to get away from this person, to start a new life. Like this next guy, oh my God, like he gives me, like if he was like Black Panther and Blade, he was awesome with a weapon. He had purpose, so much so that he traveled all the way from Africa to search for his father. That film Black Knight with Martin Lawrence, oh God, I think he would definitely turn in his grave because it doesn't do him any justice. But we all know about King Arthur, Sir Galahad, Guinevere and Merlin, but not many people know about Samorian. In the saga of Samorian, he was described as, quote, "He was all black, even as I tell ye, his head, his body and his hands were all black, saving only his teeth. His shield and armour were even those of a Moor, and as black as a raven." Like, come on, gives me Black Panther and Blade vibes. Even at 14, he was taller than Lancelot and even went toe-to-toe with him. So according to legend, he came to England to find his father. And throughout his journey, he was just like knocking down knights left, right and centre. It's a classic, it gives me that classic origin story. So the saga ends with Morgan finding his father, who's called Sir Argiveld, who was also a knight of the Round Table, so another badass. They return back to Africa where his father marries his mother and they live happily ever after. But we get stuck with Lancelot, who was having an affair with the king's wife. So, seriously, come on. But it shows definitely that whitewash. But the thing is great. There's a show on BBC called Merlin, and there is a character on there who's a black character. But again, I think they just sort of put that in there for just diversity. They don't really do much to really search an origin and support Samorian in the story to really reflect and not just give this fictional character. I just don't understand. But anyway, so my next story is basically, it's like a level up. Because like, what do you do? So where do you go next once you become one of the top military leaders in one of the biggest armies of the world at the time? Well, you become a saint, right? So this is the story of Saint Maurice. And Saint Maurice is one of the most venerated saints in the whole of Europe. And it's quite surprising for someone who came from Egypt. Now, his story is quite unusual because he wasn't born during the medieval ages. Actually, he was born in 250 AD in Thebes. And his story is that he eventually rose through the ranks in the Roman army. What I admire about Saint Mo is that he was a devout Christian at a time where Christianity was seen as a threat to the Roman Empire. And he was so devout that he died for his religious convictions. According to legend, the Emperor Maximus ordered Saint Mo and his legion to attack a group of Christians in modern-day Switzerland. And him, along with his whole legion, refused. So in retribution for his refusal, the emperor separated the legion into groups of 10. Then every 1 in 10 of the group was executed. Most still refused until the emperor ended up killing all 1,000 soldiers, including Saint Maurice. And then again, Saint Maurice became saint, was canonized. And in admiration for his martyrdom, he's had towns named after him. He's had even churches named after him. And in 1941, Maurice was named the patron saint of the Italian armies in the Alpines. See what's happened, and this is common practice, that these things have been whitewashed. Our existence has been sort of pushed to the background. Our blackness has been pushed back. But thanks to people such as Dr. Nubia and Carol Brown Leonardo and many others, like there's podcasts out there as well, it has proven that blacks in Britain, or black British people in Britain, is very much part of our past, our present, and definitely our future. But once again, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Sharing is caring, so share and share alike, and see you soon.